Okay, so a few things here before we get started. This is the last time I'm making a video about this because at this point we're all just going in circles, and that is okay. It is okay to agree to disagree. I will say a majority of y'all have made us a fun debate, but some of y'all once again proved that the Star Wars fandom is highly toxic. For my brother behind me, Dark Choco, you're not the one that made it toxic, and I appreciate that. I even appreciate the fact that you went and watched all my other videos and then also took notes. So because of that, I'm basically gonna let your video play in the background, and I'll kind of edit in and out what I have to say to your rebuttals to my rebuttals. So for everybody else, this is going to be a long video because Dark Choco gave me about a 5-minute think piece, and that is okay. So go ahead and tap that little 2x speed if you actually want to hear everything we're talking about. But let's get into it.
Up. I took some notes, and yeah, just wanted to talk about it because I get what you're saying. I get everything you're trying to say. It's just wrong. Now, before you come after me and get mad or anything like that, hear me out. And I actually want to use one of your examples because I actually liked it, right? Because if you have a complete story and then you jam like something random in the middle, then yeah, you do have a hole. That part is correct. The problem with what you're saying is that you are creating the hole, not Lucasfilm. That's the problem.
Actually, no, that's not the case. The hole that is opening up is a story written, produced, and directed and released by Lucasfilm. As I have already said, that the whole purpose of the idea of why I see a plot hole is because the narrative is finished. If this was going on in a completely separate galaxy, like I said, with Ahsoka, not a problem. But when it comes to Ezra, he is back in the main galaxy, dealing with someone who is a remnant of the Empire, dealing with the Empire story. Let's go there, actually. We know that the Empire storyline is done and over with, and Thrawn is part of that Empire. So either when they obviously defeat him and they go away and all the other stuff, they're just gone, or they become the seeds that lead into the First Order, or even worse than that, because most of us don't really care about the somehow Palpatine survived, or he's back, or whatever the line is, then that could also technically lead into maybe Thrawn ends up joining Palpatine's like final order. But the story is over for the Skywalker saga, for the Empire, for the First Order. Thrawn being interjected into the middle of a story that we already know is done is opening up a hole in the plot. Ezra being a Jedi who is fighting Thrawn, who also was part of the Rebel Alliance, who will most likely get involved. I get what people are saying in terms of, oh, well, these are just assumptions. Yes, but these are strong assumptions based on actual evidence. My question is, does anyone get mad at film theory or game theory or style theory for this stuff? Because apparently I'm the only one catching flack. It's a gap in the narrative. Like, that's what it is.
Let's check out the definition that you were using for a plot hole. So let's go back and actually use your definition. See, that's you right there, right? A plot hole is an unintentional inconsistency or unexplained gap in a story's plot, logic, or established rules that contradicts previously presented information. And you really hammer down on this last part, right? It breaks the story's internal coherence. When Element 7 said that Ezra would be dealing with Thrawn in a New Republic, what was your response, right? You said, well, what would Luke be doing? He's dealing with the New Republic because his sister runs it, right? And both Ezra and Luke are Jedi, so they would absolutely intersect. If that happened in any of Lucasfilm's story, then you would be right, but that doesn't happen in any of their stories. That doesn't happen in any of their plots. Like, seriously, tell me, what story is Luke dealing with the New Republic? Where does that happen, right?
So you actually bring up an interesting point here that shows me that I guess none of the Star Wars fandom really is reading the comics. Let me just flex a little bit because maybe I'm the comic book nerd out of all of us in the Star Wars fandom. I don't know. But you're not the only one that asked that question. Like, several other people asked that question, like, where is he dealing with the New Republic? And I did get one conversation in the comments that I talked to. But there literally is the Battle of Jakku. Marvel did a whole 3-part series about the Battle of Jakku, which is basically like the last like hurrah of the Empire right after the fall of the second Death Star. And so you have Insurgency Rising, Republic Under Siege, and The Last Stand. And if you notice, in case you didn't see him all the way, Luke's on every single cover because his whole entire narrative in that storyline is he's out there trying to figure out what force help does the remnants of the Empire have now that Palpatine is gone. Leia and Han and all of them are waiting to hear from Luke about what force help is there out there that is causing the Empire to fight as hard as they are. This is literally Luke working with the New Republic. Now, let me say it, like I said, in the comments, I was able to talk to somebody. Someone mentioned the book Bloodlines. Like, I have not read Bloodlines yet. It is on my TBR. That being said, apparently Bloodlines takes place after this comic. But you guys are arguing, where does Luke ever do this? He does do it in that comic book. That whole, like, there's like 12 issues, I believe, total in that whole entire series. So you're talking about like a year's worth of storytelling in Star Wars is Luke literally fighting still with the New Republic, not the Rebel Alliance anymore, because they are established as the New Republic. So yes, I get it. I do need to go read Bloodlines to show that he apparently separates himself from the rest of them. That's fine. Doesn't change the fact Ezra is still around. That is not a theory, it is a fact. Ezra is around. Ezra was part of the Rebel Alliance, and Ezra currently knows that Thrawn is a threat. You try and tell me he's going to go take him on by himself? No, he's going to go ask for help. So he's going to get involved with the New Republic. I get it. These are quote-unquote theories, but these are theoretical plot holes at that point. You want to really start pulling hairs at the words I'm using? They're theoretical plot holes. They are still a hole in the plot. Ezra is still back. Thrawn is still a threat. They got to be handled somewhere in between the 20-year gap.
Yeah, sure. Leia is part of the New Republic, but just because your sister works for the New Republic doesn't mean you do. Like, where are you getting that from? What story from Lucasfilm? Not something you made up in your head. What story from Lucasfilm is that contradicting?
My bad. I didn't let the video play long enough to put my interjection in the right spot, but I already answered that.
But Luke and Ezra are both Jedi, so of course they would intersect. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. I'm sorry. For all the things you bring up in this video, that to me was your weakest argument. Because if Luke can be involved with a 50-year-old alien baby, I'm pretty sure he can be involved with also a Jedi who's literally the same age as him, by the way. Also, you're going to make the claim here in a little bit that, well, Ezra belongs to the old Jedi way. So does Grogu, technically. So he got involved with Grogu, which that is, let's be completely honest, when you look at that actual story, that is completely, and I mean completely separate compared to Ezra dealing with Thrawn. Grogu is with Mando, and there's no way they should have intersected except for obviously Grogu sent out a telepathic message through the Force. Sorry, that's more random than Ezra running into Luke because he's dealing with the New Republic and dealing with threats and remnants of the old Empire. Including when you add in the fact that Thrawn is very much interested in the Skywalkers. He's one of the few who actually knew who Darth Vader was. So again, you ain't going to tell me someone who is highly intelligent and loves gathering information is not going to hear that Luke is starting a new school of Jedi and not take that as a threat that he probably should eliminate. Old way, new way of Jedi, doesn't matter. The Jedi are a threat to the Empire, to the First Order, to Thrawn, whatever it may be. And my personal opinion, everybody who keeps acting like, oh, these are just theories. Well, yes, and it's theories based off who these characters are and the narrative that we do already have. And so by saying these characters maybe will intersect, that's a disservice to what Lucasfilm has already done and given us. And frankly, it's a service to us, to those who love these characters. If we love these characters and say we know them as who they are, then we should completely understand that these characters would intersect. And we should want these characters to intersect as well. If they don't intersect, frankly, you're going to have to write a very good narrative to explain why. I already talked about that when Element 7 brought up the MCU. That's exactly what they had to do with Captain Marvel and the Eternals. Those were plot holes. And they didn't really fill them in that well. So frankly, we should all be worried that these characters are now involved in a story that's technically already finished and they're nowhere to be seen in the ending. I don't know about you, but I frankly don't want, oh, well, they were just traveling in space for 30 years. I really don't want to see that in Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm is struggling more than the MCU. We probably should have a little more of an argument.
I mean, Luke is starting a new Jedi school. Ezra belongs to the old Jedi. It's two different organizations. They literally don't, he's creating a new Jedi Order. Ezra has never belonged to that new Jedi Order, and that has never been discussed or implied.
Correct. It hasn't yet, but that doesn't mean we should just neglect that they're both part of a group of force wielders who believe that light and life should be the driving force of the galaxy. And frankly, I would argue that Ezra doesn't belong to the old Order of the Jedi. That was literally the whole entire story arc between Kanan and Ezra in Star Wars Rebels. It was the idea that Kanan came to understand what true balance of the Force was by working with the Bendu, because the Bendu was neither light nor dark. He told Kanan himself, those are human terms. And that is the same master that Ezra learned under, which made it so impactful when he sacrificed himself the way that he did. Because attachment is about doing what you can to preserve the life of your loved ones, not doing what you can to hang on to the life of your loved ones. When he went through the journey of working with Darth Maul and touching the dark side but never fully succumbing to it, because again, light and dark are human concepts. Attachments are not a problem. It's being willing to do whatever you can to hang on to those attachments is a problem. A lesson that Luke learned and is teaching his new Order of Jedi. I saw another video recently of someone talking about the choice that Luke gave to Grogu about whether or not he wanted to stay, because Grogu was at a point to where, yes, he had built his attachment, but he had not matured to the point to where he wasn't going to do anything to keep said attachment. And so Luke gave him a choice. And I'm getting off topic now, but at the same time, it's an understanding that both Luke and Ezra understand that attachments are not the problem. It's obsession with said attachments that is a problem. And because those are similar teachings, why would they not intersect?
At all. Luke being part of the rebellion doesn't imply in any way that he'd be involved at all with the New Republic, like a government. He's shown zero interest in government. In fact, we know that he's only interested in the Jedi part and establishing a new Jedi school and finding Jedi children to train.
So my question to everybody who has actually made it this far, do we not know who Luke Skywalker is? So my question would be, in this case, do we just assume that Luke is arrogant? Because last I checked, arrogance was a pathway to the dark side of the Force. So do we really believe that Luke, who had not studied his entire life in the Jedi ways and basically pretty much new to it in like the last maybe decade at this point, wouldn't want to get more help in teaching other people if he heard that there were other Jedi around? Last I checked, schools don't just require one teacher. So if Luke happened to hear that there is another Jedi running around, why would he not ask them to come check out the school, see if they want to be a part of what he's doing? And let's make for the argument that Luke apparently doesn't ever hear about Ezra. Okay, well, again, I'm sorry. No one's going to convince me Ezra is not going to at some point work with the New Republic. The New Republic, whether it's directly with Leia or anybody else, it's going to get back to Leia at some point that there is another Jedi working with the New Republic. And so Leia will make sure that connection happens because we know she goes and trains with Luke. This idea that Luke just is only focused on building a school and would never ask for help is wild to me. Like, frankly, it's another plot hole. Just, again, let me just say, just episode 7 by itself. The fact that Luke Skywalker was the only teacher at this Jedi school, that's wild to me. Now, with the previously established canon, yes, Luke was the only one around. But now, with current canon, we know that there are other Jedi around. Why wouldn't he get other teachers to help? Does Charles Xavier, is he the only one who teaches the mutants at school? Was Albus Dumbledore the greatest wizard of all time? Was he the only one that ever taught any of the kids at school? Camp Half-Blood was filled with a bunch of gods and other mythical creatures that could help teach these demigods in the ways of being Greek immortals. Frankly, I think it's wild that everybody had made the argument that Luke would just do this all by himself.
We now know that Leia had no interest in pursuing being a Jedi, and Luke has never shown interest in being part of the Republic. So you mean to tell me that Ezra isn't going to show up and fight the First Order? Like, the First Order doesn't reveal themselves at all to the galaxy until about 6 years before The Force Awakens. That's like a 20-year gap between where we see him at the end of Ahsoka Season 1 and the First Order revealing themselves. Like, you can't honestly believe not knowing where a character is 2 decades in the future is a plot hole. Like, even by your own definition, like where Ezra is doesn't break any of the coherence of the story.
I cannot tell you how excited I am to finally get to this part, because when I first watched the video, I was just like, ooh, I'm ready. Because a lot of people actually in the comments started arguing with me and being upset about the fact that I used an AI generated answer when, I'm sorry. Okay, so mind you, we all know my name is Upcoming Author. I am a writer, right? So I full-heartedly disagree with AI when it comes to the idea of using it for creativity. But in terms of gathering information that's already readily available on the internet, why would I not use a tool that makes it easy to gather that information? But I hear you. It's a criticism, and that's fine. It's a criticism that you all can have. And so let me go ahead and rectify that right now. This definition is from CambridgeUniversity.com. It's their dictionary. Part of the plot equals story of a movie or book that does not fit with other parts of the plot. Characters showing up when they have never been mentioned before in a story that's already finished does not make sense. Let's use the Avengers storyline again, because with Captain Marvel, she was put into the middle of a story that wasn't actually finished yet. So we had questions. It was a plot hole, but it wasn't that big of a deal until they pointed out that she apparently has existed since the 90s. Now everything else that's been previously established, it comes in the question of where the heck was she? And to show you how much of a nerd I am, me and my wife talk about this all the time. So me and my wife were talking about this specific video in terms of when it came to Captain Marvel not being around. Like Age of Ultron, I get it. That's probably where you may not want to call Captain Marvel. But the Chitauri attacking New York and Fury didn't call Marvel them? Sorry, that's the plot hole. Because it wasn't just, oh, she was off doing stuff with the Skrulls for 30 years. It was, hey, if you ever need me, call me. The Chitauri attacking New York, she should have been called. And he also brought up the fact that earlier I really focused on the word coherence. So let me bring up coherence, which again, this is dictionary.com, definitions from the Oxford Languages, okay? So this isn't AI, the quality of being logical and consistent. It is not logical for all of us who sit here and say characters who are actively involved in the war effort would never intersect. It is not consistent with the story that we have already been told, which comes to the second definition, the quality of a unified whole. The story about the Empire, the First Order, because again, people were getting all booty tickled about me just saying, oh, the Skywalker sagas is not that important because there's other things that, okay, cool. The war effort, focus on the war effort. The overall war effort from the end of the Clone Wars all the way up to the end of the Final Order. That is one coherent story where people are in the background doing things and setting stuff up. And so the fact that we know that whole entire story and now characters are being interjected in the middle makes it not coherent.
He's literally not relevant to the plot. So you don't need to know where he is. Like, it sounds like you're making a lot of weird assumptions because you've read some Legends material, which is great. Some great stories there.
Actually, that's a wild assumption because besides mentioning the original Thrawn trilogy, I don't believe I've mentioned anything else in Legends. I have been sticking to what Ahsoka Season 1 gave us, what The Mandalorian gave us. I've been sticking to what the sequel trilogy has given us. That's been my main focus. At the end of the day, though, what we have been told is Thrawn is part of the Empire. So Thrawn, now being back in the main galaxy, where the Empire had been destroyed, and he still believes in the Empire, he's going to be a problem that the New Republic will have to deal with. He has already proven he is very interested in the Skywalker, specifically Anakin and his tactical genius. And so he's going to be interested in Luke and how Luke was able to be a driving force in, again, destroying the Empire. And then we also have the fact that Luke building a new school of Jedi is a threat to his vision for the galaxy. And Ezra was part of that threat for 5 years in a whole nother galaxy. These aren't assumptions. This isn't Legends. This is just facts from the stories we have already been given. And yes, I am making theories on where the story could go. It does not change the fact that these are now gaps in the narrative that is taking an already unified story and making it incoherent because these characters are nowhere to be seen later on. And let me go ahead and add this in there as well, because some people were bringing up the fact that Ezra could be dead, or, and all this other stuff. I think there's only one person that I talked to in any of the comments that remembered Ezra and Luke basically are pretty much twins. Ezra was born on Empire Day, which is literally the celebration of being made into a galactic empire. Luke and Leia were born around that same time. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're thinking, like, oh, it's 20 years later, Ezra could be doing, like, remember, they're the same age. So if Luke is around, why isn't Ezra?
But it's not conflicting with anything in canon. And you can't just make up something and then get mad because something conflicts with the thing you made.
So I think a lot of people are getting caught up on the idea of the fact that the story's not finished yet. Okay? No, their part of the story is not finished yet. As I said here, these are side quests to the main story. The main story is already told and done. So what happened to these side quest characters, and why are they not around at the ending of the main story? Like, just focus on that. I am asking a question. Where are these characters? Before they were introduced into the current canon, didn't have those questions. Didn't need those questions answered. The story told me Luke was the only one around training people. Kylo Ren destroyed the Jedi Temple. Luke survived. He went into exile. Cool. Great. Gucci. We're good. And then they added into the middle of the story. They took the narrative and punctured a hole into the narrative they have already given us. So now it's no longer coherent, because now I have questions. Questions that we all should have. Questions that we all had when Ahsoka was introduced after freaking Revenge of the Sith. It was the same question that we all had. It was, whoa, what? Anakin was training another Jedi? Well, where is she? If he was able to train another Jedi, why was he not given the rank of master? Plot holes in a coherent story that they eventually filled later on. Just because the story is not finished in her area did not change the fact that it was still a hole in the narrative we had already been told. So back again to this. It is a hole in the narrative we have already been told. Yes, it is a separate story, but it is a side quest story. We'll get answers. That's fine. I'm just pointing out the fact that why does Star Wars keep doing this? Why does Lucasfilm keep doing this? Why not just go further in the past or the future and stop messing around with the established storyline? I mean, the answer to that is money, because they're afraid to try anything new, and we are all basically just hung up on nostalgia. So instead of actually doing anything before or after, they continue to stick right in the middle, because unfortunately Star Wars fans are extremely toxic and don't really give anything else a chance. The Acolyte, anybody? Oh, and before anyone comes at me for mentioning The Acolyte and how people feel about that, let me go ahead and let everybody know right now, so everyone keeps wanting to coming at my credentials when it comes to Star Wars. I have read almost everything when it came to the High Republic. You saw my comic book collection. A big chunk of that is all the High Republic comic books. I have read basically every adult and young adult novel when it comes to the High Republic. So yes, for me, I was excited about The Acolyte. It let me down in some areas, and it is what it is on that. But don't come at me about like I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to the High Republic, because I've been in it. I walked into my comic book shop and told them I want everything High Republic. My comic book guy looked at me like I was crazy. I said, nope. Everything that is labeled the High Republic, I want it. Because I knew eventually Star Wars would start dipping into the High Republic for its other forms of media. And then they did The Acolyte, and Star Wars fans are toxic, so here we are. But let's get back to everything else. Let's use another hypothetical here. Outside of Star Wars, if Lin-Manuel Miranda suddenly created a whole new musical based off of somebody somehow finding Eliza's letters that she quote unquote burned after Alexander Hamilton wrote the Reynolds pamphlet, we would all have questions on where was this person in the original narrative of the original musical. It creates a hole in the narrative that has already been told. Don't know how many times I gotta repeat that. At this point, we're like at a 20-minute video, so I just need to wrap this up. But still, it is a hole in the already established narrative, making it incoherent until those answers get told to us. Again, I'm not saying that these stories are just done. It doesn't change the fact, though, that here right now, this is interjecting a story in the middle of an already established story. And trying to make the argument that these characters wouldn't interact, or maybe they would, is a weak argument when these characters are very strong leaders in the overall narrative. This isn't Red 3 in a random plane that gets blown up. No, this is Ezra, Ahsoka, Leia, Luke, the Jedi, Thrawn, the Empire. These are the main plot pieces of the story. If I finish a puzzle and hang it on the wall, and then suddenly start trying to add more pieces to it, or start removing pieces from it, what does that do? It creates a convoluted mess, or it creates a hole.
Made up. Also, there's two different ways to look at Star Wars, right? You have individual stories, or you have an overall narrative of the Skywalker saga. You, in your previous video, even said, like, Anakin Skywalker is the main character, or, it's about the Skywalkers, or whatever. Is the location of Ezra relevant to that plot? Relevant to that overall story? Does him not being in it make the story itself not make sense? Because that's what you're trying to say. And no, it's not relevant. If you want to prove your point, do it without making stuff up. Give me an actual Lucasfilm story and tell me where the conflict is in the story. Not something you made up, not one of your theories or educated guess or headcanons, right? Because that's you creating a conflict. Let me know where the conflict is in the Lucasfilm. And by the way, a lot of the things that you've mentioned, we actually have the answers to. Like, there's canon material that covers it, and you just haven't read it. Like, you just don't know the answer. It's not a plot hole. Jesus.
So actually, that's not true. Both you and also Element 7 said that, oh, you just haven't read that stuff. The only evidence that anyone's given me is Bloodlines. That is it. Bloodlines showing that Luke chooses to distance himself from the New Republic. Cool. That's fine. But no, I cannot answer that question for you. I cannot tell you what Lucasfilm property shows where Ezra is at, because we just got that interjected into the story. I can't give you a property that tells me where, if Ezra and Luke ever interact with each other, because again, that part of the story is not finished yet. And I get that, but it does not change the fact that we know down the road, Luke is the only one around when it comes to the destruction of the Jedi Temple. So until then, in that 20-year timeline, there is a gap in the narrative of, where's Ezra? Is he not important anymore? I would argue he is. What happened to Thrawn? Literally one of the smartest men in the Empire. Like, that needs to be established. He is part of the Empire, and somehow the First Order becomes a thing. Does Thrawn end up working with Snoke at all? Is Thrawn fully defeated in the First Order something completely different from the Empire, right? They mentioned themselves, they rose from the ashes of the Empire. So what ashes? Like, it's okay to ask questions about a story that now, technically, is not finished. But everyone getting mad at me for having educated guesses and theories, why are we all acting like we don't do that in our own friend circles? Why are we trying to act like we don't try to guess how things are going to end? Why are we trying to act like when The Last Jedi came out, we weren't all trying to guess, what does that mean? What does that title mean? The Last Jedi, is that about Luke? Is that about Rey? What's going to happen? We all make guesses and theories. That is okay. That's one reason why the fandom is so strong, because we love talking about the fandom. But acting like I'm using a unholy word and trying to act like Lucasfilm is doing something absolutely terrible and evil is wrong. The narrative is finished. Lucasfilm has told us it is over. And based off, again, going back to what I said earlier, I am using only what is already established, based off what was established in the sequel trilogy, having suddenly a couple of characters who are not just flimsy red number 3 characters who get blown up in an X-Wing. These are characters who are very crucial to the Clone Wars and the Rebel Alliance and the battle between the Empire and the Rebels 5 years before A New Hope. These are characters that are important. So, Where the heck are they? You have to answer that question. Again, it is the Captain Marvel argument. Where are you? Nothing wrong with that. It is a hole. That's going to be filled. I'm not arguing it won't be filled. I'm not arguing it won't be finished. I'm not arguing we won't get told what's going to happen. Doesn't change the fact that it's a hole. Anyway, this is it. I'm done. We're like 30 minutes now. But I will say again, Dark Choco, if you did watch all of this, I appreciate your video. It was fun going back and forth with you. Element 7, if you happen to watch this, cool, fun going back and forth with you as well. But it's what it is, y'all. Like, we can agree, disagree, and that's fine. It's okay. But let me say this at least. Stop acting like I don't know what I'm talking about. You don't like the evidence I gave you? I only gave you what's already in the story. Can't help with that. There are some things I haven't read, and I've acknowledged that, yes, I didn't read that stuff, so, okay, cool, that's fine. Doesn't change the fact that the other questions aren't answered. So, besides Bloodlines, that's the only thing anyone has given me. Y'all can point me to other sources. I will happily go read those sources when I get the time, because y'all saw my collection. That I'm reading stuff all the time. I'm still reading the High Republic. Like I said, I've read almost everything. The series finally ended, and I'm at the beginning of Phase 3. So I need to go finish all those as well. But come on, y'all. Like, you guys took this just a little too seriously, in my opinion. Just my opinion. That's okay. Anyway, for all those who actually stayed and watched this whole entire 30-minute video, love y'all. Y'all have a good day. God save and say. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.